Origin Form Dialga V-Star, the new kid on the block, versus the anti-meta deck. There's going to be a lot to really analyze and break down here, Pablo.
There's definitely going to be so much going on the field, as you mentioned, Ethan, and we did see Dialga at Indianapolis, right, take down that control deck in top 4. However, how do you think Isaiah was able to adapt? Do you think he has a game plan for Dialga specifically?
Well, there's one card I'm going to talk about. I'm just going to get out of the way. Isaiah is playing that Entei V, and that has got to be the card you keep your eye on for sure. Of course, just being there as a Pokemon that can deal enough damage to one-hit knock out that Origin Form Dialga V-Star. And if you put a Hero's Cape on it, they can't even knock you out back if they're using a big Metal Blast, because these prize cards, nothing too relevant. We do see Rare Candy, a few Pokemon in play, but I think we are ready to get into this 6th Swiss round. Get ready, grab a drink, grab some food, and get settled. We are going to have a great match for sure, as we are getting ready to kick things off underway. And Isaiah will be more than happy to see this starting Pokemon start. That Entei V in the active spot will be going first and has immediate confirmation, knows what deck he's playing against, and it will be Beldum featuring Matang and that Dialga V-Star.
Yeah, starting Entei, attaching energy. For Krystal, this all seems like a standard Charizard deck. Now, we did see Isaiah is playing a 1-1 copy of, or a 1-1 line of Charizard EX. The Charmander is indeed prized. So, I don't know. I feel like Krystal might have a little bit of confusion in the early game as to what she's up against. And as you mentioned, seeing that Entei V in the beginning, probably what Isaiah loves to have at this moment.
Speaking of cards that are great to have at the start, Buddy Buddy Poffin, an excellent card, can search out these Beldum for Krystal, but immediately, maybe there's a little bit of uncertainty in terms of how you want to open this board up. You see an Entei V and Energy and a Pidgey. I mean, Pablo, this could very well just be Charizard playing a copy of that Entei. Do you think Krystal, even without having this knowledge, or with having this knowledge, should bench a bunch of Beldum, get ready to use Metal Maker as much as possible, or maybe conserve a little bit on this first turn and wait for some more information?
I really think, I mean, ideally she should wait, but I don't think, based on how popular Charizard has been for the whole format, basically since rotation, I think you always just set up normally, right? Assume you're playing against a Charizard deck, and then Isaiah will probably be able to take advantage of that. But Krystal does play that very peculiar Minior Tech card. We'll have to see if that comes into play against a potential Mowell or a potential Snorlax. If there is no copy of Snorlax, so never mind, Minior probably not going to be relevant here.
We'll just see 2 Beldums get benched. There was one in the prize cards, I believe, so Krystal will have to just be content with 3 Metal Maker abilities for the time being. And I believe also has a few supporter options she can choose from, like that Professor's Research and that Iono. It's really hard to incentivize playing Iono when your opponent really didn't do much on their first turn.
Yeah, that's definitely very important to consider. However, I will say Isaiah went first, right? So there's no guarantee that if you were playing against a regular Charizard or whatever, like they didn't have an Arven or an Iono themselves. So I think that tell is very tricky on the first turn specifically. In every other turn, yes, go for the research and stuff that I don't know, but I feel like that's not always true in the very first turn of your opponent had when they couldn't play supporters.
Not too many crucial resources hitting the discard pile. We did see another Professor's Research, Iono. I mean, Iono's a great card against a deck like this Pidgeot control deck that wants to build up a large hand size. And we're going to see this Metal Lift attack, something we don't see a lot from this deck, especially when you're trying to attack with Dialga V-Star, but it is very useful, and even though there's another Beldum that has 10 more HP, this one is great at finding you cards, especially since it puts it on top of your deck, confirming that even if you get hand disrupted, you'll still draw into it on the next turn.
Yep, if you got Iono, you know you're going to find that card. If you don't, you know you're going to find that card, so it's a win-win. And as you mentioned, that 10 HP trade-off is completely worth it. Maybe having one of the 70 HP can be good to protect a little bit against Lost Box decks, but for now, this Magnetic Lift really putting in the work for Krystal.
Let's see if we can see what Isaiah is working with at this position. Wow, there is not a lot going on in this hand. Has to attach the Forest Sealstone and use that V-Star power. Whenever you can save that for longer, it's usually better, but that is actually going to be a good enough card in this situation. It's not a super explosive start, but it's all about getting this Rare Candy Pidgeot, and with this Forest Sealstone and with a Pidgeot EX in hand, if Isaiah wants to, We could see Arvin get played, grab some of these important tool cards, and get Pidgeot EX established and ready to use Quick Search for as many turns as Isaiah can, sort of protecting this Pidgeot from all threats on Krystal's side.
Yeah, getting that protection going to be very, very key and very thorough with his price checking, right? And that's something that you need to do as the control player. You need to know exactly what resources you count with, and with the loss of Peonia to rotation, there's very few ways to manipulate and access cards in your prize card. So that's something that you always need to account. There's Hisuian and Heavy Ball to get that Charmander, but everything else is probably locked in there until you start being aggressive, which Isaiah's deck is actually pretty well built to be able to be either control or show a little bit of aggression.
Yeah, I mean, you can use something like Daisy's Help if you really want to take a look at your prize cards, but for most control players, it seems they've come to the same consensus. Really not worth investing that. We will just see Rare Candy itself get grabbed, so Isaiah may want to play a different supporter card this turn, not lock himself into Arvid. We'll use Quick Search, so every single turn, Isaiah with this powerful Pidgeot EX, just there for that Quick Search ability, can search the deck for any card and put it into his hand, allows for so many potential combos, so many potential plays for Isaiah, as long as that's in play.
Yeah, now Isaiah continuing to be thorough with his price checking after his first search with the Force Heal Stone. He figured out the Pokemon, I'm pretty sure the energy. Now he's putting those supporters at the back of his deck to figure out exactly what he has access to. He's quick searching right now, hasn't decided yet. I think he was going to put the two cards as if he was playing the Arvin, but needs to grab the Arvin first.
Yeah, and this is an interesting spot for Isaiah. Now, I mentioned that having that tool card on the Entei V does give it more HP, but even if it's not there, 230 is still a very nice number. It plays out of the way that the 40 plus 40 works. It means that you can hit 220 with Dialga if you have something like 5, or rather, you hit 240. So the number actually works out in an okay way, but it does play around Star Chronos taking a one-hit knockout. Now, it is always possible, even with 2 Metal Makers on board, and Isaiah could be considering that as a way things could turn south very quickly.
Yeah, we do see the boss's orders. There's no... Oh, there is an energy.
Yeah.
There we go.
And that's perfect math there because of the weakness. Burning Rondo will be dealing 120 damage times 2. A turn 2 knockout here for Isaiah after just attaching and passing to Entei. This is why this card is so powerful, especially in a control deck wanting to deal with such an aggressive powerhouse that is Dialga.
Yeah, and Krystal, if she had no indication that this was anything other than a Charizard deck, now she definitely does, right? This Sandshrew is so crucial, and she needs to make sure, she must know now that she's up against some sort of control deck, does find that Iono, and disrupts Isaiah's hand a little bit, but with Pidgeot in play, Isaiah seems to be in full control at this point.
I want to make that a common thing. Every time that somebody stacks a card at the top of their deck, we should see the top deck every time. Whoa, how did that card get there?
So surprising.
What did they draw into? How did they get there? But of course, did prepare a very strong card on the top of the deck for the following turn, and now there are no Dialga in play, so Krystal, no matter what attack she wants to use here, will not be dealing enough damage to knock out Entei. But you gotta really think, okay, if I'm taking this turn off, if I'm gonna use some Metal Maker, put energy into play, my opponent does have Pidgeot EX, so they can kind of do what they want with their hand, with their board. What do I do this turn to make sure that even if my opponent's gonna take another prize next turn, I can come back and keep myself in this game? That's really the question here to think about.
Yeah, now, Krystal should also try to get 2 Dialgas down so that 1 can survive, assuming that Isaiah goes for a boss to knock it out. However, she chooses to go for the Zamazenta, which unfortunately doesn't deal enough damage to KO this 230 HP and take 10 damage off. So important to have that number for the Star Chronos and also for the Zamazenta.
And it's so tough either way, Pablo, because if you bench double Dialga, you're guaranteed not knocking this Entei out. So if there's something like a Pidgeot to quick search boss, then you take that knockout there, and then from there, if your opponent brings up Dialga, Magma Basin can just power up the Entei again, and we are seeing very quickly how this Entei is causing a huge problem for Krystal's Dialga deck.
Yeah, now, Krystal doesn't know this, but Isaiah only plays 1 boss's orders, right? So the 2 Dialgas would have been safe unless Isaiah found a Palpad, which he plays 2 copies of, and then found it again, which is not easy to do, definitely possible. But yeah, Krystal probably in very uncharted territory at this point.
It's hard. This is where a deck like Control that can be built so many different ways really thrives, because gotta play these weird guessing games when making lines without having information. Surely a deck that maybe wants to trap things in the active with Snorlax would play more copies of Boss's Orders, but Krystal just does not have that information yet. Has to sort of make these guesses, these educated guesses, as NTV absorbing that hit with 10 HP remaining. There is a guaranteed knockout online, and of course Isaiah can continue to just build the hand up, draw cards every turn that Entei is V, thanks to that fleet-footed ability, and now with a 6-card hand, can use Quick Search and find, yet again, any card he wants out of the deck.
Yeah, Quick Search, such a powerful ability. I love seeing it back, Ethan. I used Quick Search almost 20 years ago at the World Championships, and now it's back. It's so great. It's so powerful, as we are seeing right now, allowing Isaiah to have full control, essentially, over this game.
And a lot of solid choices. Now, Isaiah is playing that 101 line of Charizard EX. Now, it's not doing enough damage with Burning Darkness just yet, but it can potentially down the line, of course, also being able to accelerate those fire energies into play in combination with something like Radiant Charizard. And this is where Isaiah just has so many options, especially when he is ahead and in this much of dominating control in Game 1.
Yeah, this as you mentioned, all these options just give Isaiah the flexibility to adapt to pretty much any situation. And Krystal against the wall here, I mean, she can follow this attack from Zamazenta with a knockout, with even a Beldum, right? Is it tackle, I think? I don't even know what the second attack
It gets in there. It does enough damage. It gets the job
20
done.
damage, gets the job done, as you mentioned. If you can do that and bench 2 Dialga at the same time, that could be good, but I think I remember Krystal's hand being a little underwhelming. Only a Pokegear available there, which does have a high chance of hitting, but is not guaranteed.
So we'll see the Radiant Charizard come down right now, of course, with Krystal yet to take any prize cards. That Excited Heart ability is not active. Combustion Blast will cost a whopping 5 energy to deal that damage, but it does the job. With all these Pokemon being fire weak, it can take a one-hit knockout, but to power that up, this heavy ball can find Charmander out of the prizes. And with a Charizard EX in hand, it means that if Entei falls, a lot could go south very quickly if Krystal wants to put another Dialga V into play.
Yeah, that's probably her priority at this point, right? Getting those 2 Dialga Vs, as we do see that Charmander hit the board. Yeah, so many threats, right? It seems like a weird Charizard deck at this point by Isaiah, honestly.
Of course, Tord Reklev showing off that powerful Charizard control deck. Now, the way Isaiah has built this is very different from Tord. It plays a lot more of a control aspect than the Charizard line, but they both are made possible thanks to Pidgeot EX, that quick search ability, really putting in work here for Isaiah. As Krystal staring down a 3-prize lead so far from Isaiah, having no Dialga V in play, no big threats for attacks, and with the Beldum coming up right away, yeah, sure, you can deal 20 damage, take the knockout to Entei, but I mean, this Pidgeot EX could sneeze on Beldum and it will knock out with something like a double turbo energy. And from there, Charizard, Entei again, Charizard EX, Radiant. There's so many options that Krystal has to prepare for. And it really, with how this deck is built to be, which is just aggressive, hit hard, hit fast, you don't have a lot of leverage to maneuver around tricky attackers.
Yeah, now, perhaps a small misstep for Krystal if she decides to use this Pokegear. Probably wanted to do that before playing the Super Rod. Still finds a research, which is great, but by playing Super Rod did decrease the odds a little bit by putting more non-supporter cards into your deck. Now she has a choice between Iono and Research. What would you go for here?
It's 1 card difference at this point, but you do put your opponent down to a 3-card hand, and with Charmander hitting the board, you may have to assume there's one of those 2 pieces, Rare Candy or Charizard in the hand. You've got to start to just come back and disrupt your opponent, but I mean, I don't hate this either from Krystal. Just get aggressive, draw extra cards. You've got to find a way to get back into this game. We do see a few cool pieces there. Card we haven't really talked about yet, that Minior, of course, does have the ability when you attach to it for turn, you can switch it into the active spot. Great to play around cards like Snorlax with that block ability. However, Isaiah not really playing a trapping strategy, just relying on using these powerful Fire-type Pokemon, disrupting the opponent with things like Luxray. Not going to be too important of a card in this matchup.
Now, Krystal could take the chance of only benching 1 Dialga because she is going to be able to take down this Entei. So retaliation from Isaiah would be a little more difficult. There's no access to Counter Catcher at this point. So that might be the plan. However, Krystal wants to go for that Zamazenta instead. I wonder if she might not realize that she can knock out, or like she might just try to power up Zamazenta again to take the knockout. Hopefully not.
Yeah, it's tough. Sometimes you can sort of tunnel vision into certain plays and really not see the Beldam is not in this deck to attack. It's just here to really evolve into Matang. But here we go. Far-flying Meteor. Meteor blasting onto the battlefield, getting in there. Gravitational tackle. Now, Entei does have a whopping 3 retreat costs, so it's doing more than enough. And more importantly, can pivot out this Beldam and evolve it to start using 3 Metal Maker abilities per turn.
Yeah, triple Metal Maker, super, super good. But you really would love to be powering up at Dialga. She does find 1 energy per Metal Maker. A lot of cards going to the bottom as well, which is important to note. I think if you're playing a deck like this one, since your deck doesn't get shuffled, sometimes you can use Metal Maker to get closer to resources that you need, right? So it's always very important to keep track of what cards you're putting at the bottom, because it is very important, not just paying attention to the energies, but making sure that you keep track of the other cards you get to see as well.
Well, that's a first in a while. Gravitational tackle on stream, taking the knockout. Krystal getting in, using all these flexible attackers. Zamazenta is powered up on the bench, but things are looking a little bit grim. Isaiah still having the prize lead, and with Pidgeot in play, it's going to get even easier as the game progresses because Charizard, rather Radiant Charizard on the bench, makes attacking so simple. With when your opponent is down to just 2 prize cards, a single Fire Energy will do it to be able to use Combustion Blast and deal big damage into all of Krystal's Pokemon.
Big damage. And I think the biggest thing is that, I mean, Isaiah already has the rare candy on the Charizard, or did already have the Charizard, can now search for the rare candy, but there's no threat of Dialga, right? So whatever Isaiah does and takes the knockout, he knows that it's going to be pretty safe because the Zamazenta caps out at 220 damage, which is not very impressive. So we are seeing a Dialga deck really not put any work through Dialga itself.
Yeah, and this is really smart here for Isaiah to grab that Pal Pad. Understands that since Krystal has taken 2 prize cards, if at any point a Dialga V comes into play, Charizard EX can just knock it out and take the final 2 prize cards. So can just put the boss's orders in play, power up this Charizard, and by going down to just 2 prize cards left, and with no V Pokemon on board for Krystal, unless there's some hidden Thornton that Krystal plays in her deck, which I'm not seeing here on this deck list sheet, then the Charizard EX is going to be safe, and from there it's going to be really hard for Krystal to claw back in this prize lead.
You know what? I can't tell you how many times my opponents have randomly surprised me with Thornton in the complete
really?
the weirdest situations, both at regionals and playing TCG live. So, of course, we have the information that Krystal doesn't have it, but if I were to say, I would definitely be a little worried about a potential Thornton play. Now, we do see the Palpat putting back the boss, very important, as you mentioned, be able to use this Charizard to chase down any Dialga that hits the board and essentially close out the game. So I think as Krystal, I would love to see her be like, okay, you know what? Couldn't stand a chance in this one. Let's go into the next game.
And even playing the Super Rod to just put back another Fire Energy into the deck, making sure that if for some reason this Charizard does go down, then we could earn another 1 prize Pokemon, then Radiant Charizard for just 1 more Fire Energy. With thanks to Pidgeot EX, things are getting oh so simple for Isaiah, and even putting that Hero's Cape onto the Radiant Charizard, boosting it up to a whopping 260 HP. Isaiah will go down to 2 prize cards, and it's finding, from here for Krystal, it's just very hard to find a way that she can get back ahead in this game, with the Pidgeot finding a card every turn, with Charizard sitting there with 330 HP, and with being behind 2 prize cards, it's looking very grim.
It is looking very grim, as you mentioned. Like, Krystal might have had a little bit of a chance if there was a 2-prize Pokemon that she could get right now, go down to 2 prizes, and then Isaiah takes another knockout, and then Mew EX comes out and takes down Charizard EX, but fortunately Krystal just doesn't have that option at this point in time with what Isaiah has on the board. She recognizes that if she benches another 2-prizer, she is going to lose, but it's just looking a little dicey because there's the Radiant Charizard already set up. So once you take down the Charizard EX, you know Radiant Charizard is going to take the last prize card, and you cannot stop Charizard EX from attacking again next turn. So pretty sure the writing's on the wall in this one, Ethan.
Krystal will do all she can to play this out. Just draw some more cards here, concealed cards. discarding the energy, drawing two cards. It feels like with how many metal energy this deck plays that you're going to draw into this eventually, but there have been a lot of metal makers used. We haven't seen too many super odds be played yet. We saw one, of course, earlier on in the game, but no matter what you put into play, you can't even hope for your opponent to not have the pieces, because not only are they on board, but even if something changes, Pidgeotty X can just find whatever Isaiah wants every turn.
You are completely right, Ethan. There's very little room to do anything at this point in time in this game with no Dialgas in play. The Zamazenta dealing, like, Zamazenta is such a powerful Pokemon. Retaliate is such a good attack. Metal Shield, such a good ability. Just not enough to carry you through a fully healed, a full HP rather, Charizard EX at this point, where your opponent has 2 prizes remaining. So a lot of actions being taken, but I think it's something that we continue to mention on stream, because we love to see more games, right? We want to see more games completed. We want to see more Pokemon. So it would be very important for players to be able to recognize when the game is probably over, so that they can play the next game and have enough time to complete the series.
Yeah, and it's hard for Isaiah, too, as a control player, because it's all the benefit, not just to Krystal, but to Isaiah as well, because if for some reason the game goes on longer and Isaiah just doesn't have a strong start, Dialga just goes full gas and knocks out Isaiah's Pokemon, he may not be able to finish a third game in a little less time. So we're actually just going to see Krystal bring up this Radiant Charizard and attack it with Zamazenta. But things are going to get a little bit more grim, because we know Isaiah in this control deck is playing Penny, which can pick up this Radiant Charizard, even though it has a big 3 retreat cost, and it can also heal all of that damage off of it.
Yeah, you play the Penny, you essentially make it as if Krystal didn't have a turn, right? And then Isaiah does 240 damage to this. Zamazenta goes down to 1 prize card and continues to be in this game-winning position. Now, it'll be interesting to see what Isaiah chooses to do here, because he can also choose to not win just yet, right? He has that possibility, and that will run out the clock a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm thinking there's a weird world where if you don't play Penny this turn and your opponent has wacky combination of cards like Lost Vacuum and Thornton, that you could actually possibly lose the game if you get something like Vacuum plus Thornton plus Star Chronos and then kill, or rather knock out your only Charizard EX in play. But we know things aren't going to be that wacky. Isaiah maybe just wanting to save Penny for later on, just in case there's another trap play that Krystal tries to set. And I think she understands, because of this Charizard being able to attack, Isaiah's going to go down to 1 prize, and from there, there's nothing Krystal can do to stop Charizard EX from finishing the job. Isaiah Bradner going up 1-0, looking to make it up to 6-0 so far here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, with the boss having been recycled in the prior turn, having access to it, knowing that your opponent can just go find it with Pidgeotty X at any moment. I love that Krystal decided, okay, you know what? On to the next game. It's a tough hill to climb, right? So many fire Pokemon that can take down your Dialga, but I imagine Krystal will now get to go first and potentially wreak havoc on Isaiah's board before Isaiah sets up here.
And that was going to be my question for you, was usually this control deck wants to go second, so is there ever a world where you go second because you don't want their deck to? But it feels like just your strategy of turn 2 Star Chronos is your best shot in this matchup.
Yeah, I think the closer you get to Star Chronos yourself is going to be the key. Now in this game 1, we did see that Entei be very aggressive in the beginning, tank the hit from Zamazenta so well, that 10 extra HP. I always tell people how 10 damage, 1 damage counter can be the difference between winning or losing championships. So very key right there that Entei was so perfect, and then we saw Radiant Charizard close out the game very easily.
And to that point, as we're getting nostalgic here, I mean, you've probably been saying 10 damage matters since Pokemon had the Pidgeot had 100 HP as a Pokemon, so it's crazy to see, even as HP numbers continue to rise and rise, that still 10 damage is so important in the Pokemon TCG.
Yeah, 330 HP in Charizard is not a coincidence, right? So that cards and players need to deal 170 at least twice, 160 twice is not enough. The upcoming Dragapult EX from Trial and Masquerade does have 320, so it's a little bit more manageable that way. As you mentioned, Ethan, over the course of my 20-year career, 10 damage has won me games and 10 damage has lost me games.
We'll see how relevant 10 damage is in game 2. Super relevant in the first. Krystal will be going first, so could threaten a powerful start in combination with turn 2 Star Chronos. And as you're shuffling up for the second game, as you're sort of in the tank a little bit thinking about this, gotta wonder here for Krystal, are you thinking, yeah, that strategy of just putting Zamazenta down over and over again really didn't work? Do I need to adjust by putting more Dialga into play? And I think we could both agree, you've got to. You have to use Star Chronos, because without it, your deck just isn't enough to keep up with the amount of fire-type Pokemon that Isaiah is.
Yeah, no, I would say Krystal was a little unlucky that Isaiah started with that NTV and had the back-to-back attachments, no problem. With only 6 energy in Isaiah's deck, with so many basic Pokemon, Pidgey, Mawile, Clefairy, Rotom, Lumineon, Charmander, Regieleki, Luxray, Sandshrew, Radiant Charizard, Mimikyu, Chi-Yu, Manaphy. That's a lot of Pokemon you can possibly start with, as opposed to NTV, and therefore, your Dialga will, on average, not be so threatened so quickly, right?
Exactly. Let's see the prize cards. Ooh, double Metal Maker Matang in the prize cards. You need those to set up a powerful turn 2. Let's see what Krystal can put together as we get down to the second game here of round number 6. As we mentioned, Krystal will be starting things off. And already does have that Beldum in the active spot and a Nest Ball to potentially get some more Pokemon. And we'll also just check the prize cards and maybe get the unfortunate news that 2 of those Metal Maker Matang are unavailable for the time being.
Not available, but we're going to start off with a Nest Ball, price checking very thoroughly as well, checking how many energies you have available so that you know how many you have access to throughout the game. Now, I don't think Krystal's hand was so good, but she could potentially establish the Greninja or could thin her hand down enough to utilize Mew EX, which can be a little liability. It's a low HP 2 price Pokemon, but sometimes the cards you get from it can be game-changing.
So we'll get the news of what Pokemon, energy cards, and everything in between are in the prize cards. It's really going to come down to these first couple of turns. I mean, Isaiah, for just going draw pass on turn 1, let's not forget that was a very strong turn 2. Rare Candy, Pidgeot, Entei attack, Boss's Orders, the only Dialga in play, and Krystal immediately looking to just get Dialga into play. We also have an Ultra Ball in the hand, so this is the question here. Do you find another basic Pokemon with this? This hand is really not looking too strong. This could be the opportunity maybe where we see something like a Mew EX or even Radiant Greninja come in and draw some more cards.
Yeah, just as I mentioned, either Mew or Greninja, even though Mew is a liability, we can still draw cards with it. Does have Super Rod, I think, Metang, and one other energy available, so we could see the Magnetic Lift next turn. Not going to be drawing too many cards, just one, but next turn that Mew could put in the work.
Yeah, smart attachment there. Just want to put it onto the Beldum. We're actually just going to see a retreat. Don't hate that play at all. Just make sure you get that out. You could get your hand disrupted. You could have a few factors come into play. And we're just going to see a Super Rod putting back those metal energies. They're not cards that you want to draw off restart, but it's sort of a trade-off in the moment. You play the Super Rod from your hand. While it does add 2 cards you don't necessarily want to draw into, it is 1 more card that you are getting from your deck.
Yeah, there's so many other cards, right? Even though you play so many energy, there's still more no energy than energy. Now that Ultra Ball will allow the establishment of another Dialga V-Star or the potential extra Dialga on the bench, and then you get to draw more cards with Mew once again. So pretty good draw right there for Krystal. We'll be able to have a follow-up. We'll probably see a knockout perhaps on the active with a little bit of extra draw, and it's going to be on Isaiah to make something happen here in terms of his setup. Get those Pidgeys down, maybe even 2, just to be extra safe and make sure you have access to a Pidgeot EX next turn.
Hey, Pablo, do you believe in dreams? Because we could see a 4 energy Metal Maker next turn. Look, don't say anything's possible. Never say never. Anything is possible. Isaiah will start his turn off with a Hisuian Heavy Ball, and we'll grab the Sandshrew. Now, of course, Sandshrew not too relevant in this matchup. Krystal is not putting back any supporter cards from their discard pile, so can just kind of put the Sandshrew wherever at this point, so it's not the worst thing to have. Of course, you can always just put it into the active spot if you need to buy a turn. And Isaiah does also have, it looks like, some more searching cards, Nest Ball as well, and we didn't see Rotom come down into play the previous game. It is a liability, of course, but it is something that sometimes you have to have a little bit of a trade-off between not doing anything in your game and getting ran over, or putting a liability in play to gain yourself some card advantage.
Yeah, and Rotom does serve a similar function to Clefairy, which we already have in the active, but Clefairy does have the limitation of if you're close to 7 cards in your hand, then Clefairy's only drawing 1 or 2, so that's where you prefer the Rotom, and as you say, Ethan, like sometimes you just have to take that risk, right? Now, it does play the boss's orders, a single copy, so it can make it a little bit hard to take down a potential backup Dialga later down the line, but we're going to see that Cleffa draws 3 cards, just the same as Rotom. Might as well do it with the Cleffa.
And that could have been an advantage to maybe not retreating the Beldum, just leaving the energy there, giving yourself an out later on. Of course, you do put the energy in the discard pile, so it is something to think about. We will just see the retreat into Metang and an Iono played, so no dreams right now of a turn 2 Star Chronos with just 1 Metang, so I'm a little bit sad about that. But hey, Cleffa's got 30 HP and is weak to metal, so Dialga will have no problem taking this knockout. Or Krystal is able to just find a metal energy off this Metal Maker. Do you think maybe not taking the knockout and instead accelerating some more energy with, of course, that attack on the Origin Form Dialga V? There are a few options here for Krystal.
I think there is merit to loading up energies from the discard pile. However, because Krystal found this Buddy Puff and does have another Metang in her hand, I think it's better to just start being aggressive against the sort of control deck. Eliminating this potential setup Pokemon is very good, and getting closer to your, like, taking knockouts without expending too many resources, I think is very, very clutch and very key. So we see the double Buddy Puffin, and we're going to see the Dialga V-Star get established. Now, I'm not super happy about discarding this Dialga V, right? You want the second one. You know your opponent's playing a lot of Fire-type resources and Fire-type threats that can take down your Dialga in one hit. So I think having the backup Dialga right here would be ideal.
Yeah, it was a really tough discard there. The other 2 cards in hand, Super Rod and Iono. So what flexibility do you have? Maybe you just rely off of Restart for the following turn and get rid of that Iono instead.
Yeah.
You also got 2. You also have 2 Metangs prized as well. So it's really just an awkward situation. But at minimum, you need that Dialga V-Star down, and we're going to see a triple energy hit off of Metal Maker. Hold on. After a slower start there for Krystal, does have very solid follow-ups, and we're also going to see another Super Rod get played, and this time bringing back a bunch of Pokemon Krystal will want to get back later, plus the Metal Energy, an always useful card for this Dialga deck.
Yeah, this Star Chronos now looking very threatening next turn. I wonder what Isaiah drew off of this. Iono, Rare Candy Pidgeot, of course, would be ideal, but with no Charmander in play, there's no possibility for Rare Candy Charizard into powering up Entei whatsoever.
Does draw into one of those Metang off the prize card, so not a bad draw at all for Krystal. And we're going to see this Pidgey promoted into the active spot, so what is Isaiah holding on to? With that Ultra Ball, this is actually going to open up Pidgeot EX as a potential. Does play that 1 copy of Luminion V in the deck, and Arven, Forest Sealstone, Rare Candy. It feels like the way that Isaiah has built this deck, or just the way Pidgeot control is built in general, makes it as easy as possible with such few resources in hand to get to Pidgeot EX as quickly as possible.
And there's the Luminion, as you mentioned, Ethan. It's almost like you've played this deck before. It's almost like you're good at this game.
Sometimes, listen, I was doing a scary amount of preparation with stall decks before I went and played in Orlando, so unfortunately, that time may be coming to an end soon with the new Twilight Masquerade cards, but listen, I'm soaking it all in right now as I can. And hey, Pidgeot EX is here. You should be happy too, man. This is like the old days for you now. We got Pidgeot EX in play too.
I love Pidgeot EX, trust me. Perhaps not in this particular strategy, but I do love being able to search for any card that I want every turn. Like, who doesn't love that, right?
Yeah, and it's great to see that they brought it back, but also in a way that's more balanced. Right? On a 2-prize Pokemon means, while it wasn't necessarily as much of a liability back then, a 2-prize, or rather a 1-prize Pokemon that searches out any card would definitely not be at the same power level. So with risk comes reward, but that reward is more than plenty for having 2 prizes being given up if it's knocked out.
Now, we did see Isaiah choose Entei V as his Pokemon, or as his quick search card. We might see that get benched and attached to. There we go. We see the Sandshrew retreat as well. And we see the counter catcher to buy more time, right? Energies dedicated to retreating this Metang means they're not energies attached to this Dialga V-Star for the Star Chronos. But Star Chronos looking pretty threatening right here.
So we'll see the restart. Does draw into a great card. There's always the risk you draw into some precious resources like Super Rod off that 1 card, but Krystal gets rewarded, and she'll go ahead and play this research. So these are a big 7 cards. If Krystal can maybe find a way to find one of those Prime Catcher, the 1 Ace Pack card, then you can maybe start to target down these 2-prize Pokemon. Of course, Entei does not get knocked out by Star Chronos, but even just getting it off the board, worth using your V-Star power if you can set up the rest of the line. And that's a 3 of a kind, Pablo, but not really a 3 of a kind that you want to see. There's only 1 bench space left, but Krystal will finally, it looks like, have the opportunity to get down a second Dialga, and that is important for making sure that when this Dialga V-Star inevitably falls, there's another one there to back it up.
Yeah, now to explain the sequencing here, because of course you can't play Nest Ball if your bench is full, but Krystal chooses to fail the first Nest Ball, chooses to fail the second one, and then uses the third to get that Dialga V-Star onto the bench. Now, this is allowing her to thin her deck by even 1 card, but finds 2 energies to be able to retreat. Now needs to hit only 1 for us to see the Star Chronos, and I think the Star Chronos would be very powerful here. Take a single prize on the Sandshrew, and then you're going to have so many energies that anything that Isaiah promotes will be very easily in range, and there's the energy.
Yeah, I feel like the only other option is you could always use Beam on the Matang, take the knockout on the Sandshrew, and then next turn give yourself some potential options, but it's scary because a single boss's orders can go ahead and ruin all the plans, and here we go, finally, Origin Form Dialga V-Star, Star Chronos V-Star power. Isaiah will promote this Pokemon, Lumineon V into the active spot, and Krystal will take an additional turn. That means an additional turn of Metal Makers, another supporter card, another attack, so many options at Krystal's disposal, and it's going to get more and more scary the more Metal Energy go onto this Dialga V-Star.
And now Krystal already has the boss's orders in her hand to target either of these 2 Pokemon, which are so much better than the Lumineon, and does decide to go after the Entei to potentially protect the Dialga V-Star here, but now Krystal's going to go down to 2 prize cards, and the Radiant Charizard will be able to take down this Dialga V-Star.
So make sure the math is correct. We can see the restart be used, drawing into 2 cards. And here come the Metal Makers. We'll look at some more cards and get this second Origin Form Dialga V-Star powered up. And with this play, Krystal will go down to just 2 prize cards, and there is a great final 2 prize target on the bench, that Lumineon V. Looks like Krystal, even after having a slower start, because Isaiah was not putting on as much aggression as quickly. Look at this now, Pablo. We've got 9 energies in play that quickly. There we go. Metal Blast taking the knockout. Krystal now just 2 prize cards away, but don't count Isaiah out because this is where this deck really takes off, especially now that you're in Radiant Charizard range. What an insane 3 cards there. The Radiant Charizard and the Iono will put Krystal down to a small hand size and fill Isaiah's small hand back up. Wow, what great cards for Isaiah.
Yeah, amazing cards to have in hand, not even needing to quick search for any of the pieces. Now can just find the energy directly, which I think was the missing piece to be able to take this knockout. Now, Krystal does already have the Dialga powered up, does have Mew to draw, and hopefully find the Prime Catcher, which is still available, or another boss to close this game down. So we might be going to a Game 3, depending on what Krystal is able to do. And another thing is, Krystal still has time, right? Even if she just takes down this Charizard and Isaiah brings it out again and knocks out the next Dialga, even Mew can take the last prize card. So we'll have to see what Isaiah has in store here.
Yeah, Krystal does have 2 cards off that Iono, but if she can maybe thin some cards out, play some energies down, restart is a great ability later on in the game. And really for Isaiah, it was worth getting Pidgeot EX into play, but at the price of putting Lumineon means that, as it stands, no more energy needed. Krystal just need to find a boss's orders, or we have not seen Prime Catcher come down yet, so there are lots of options for Krystal. Isaiah gonna do everything he can, move into this Radiant Charizard, use Combustion Blast, and from there, it's on Krystal. This is the turn where she can force a Game 3 and try and put herself into a spot to win this set.
Yeah, and a Game 3 would be I don't know, with 12 minutes on the clock, unless Krystal wins immediately here, and we see a very aggressive start from Isaiah, it's going to be a tough sell. But all right, there is a boss. There are 2 boss's orders and a Prime Catcher still available here. So Krystal choosing to thin that Beldum, which could be difficult to justify. Maybe another Dialga could be good. Maybe the Zamazenta, but just trying to win this turn. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, it's very difficult because there's something like Radiant Greninja that could come down and that can maybe draw more cards. But here we go. I think it comes down to this Pokegear. Do we see boss's orders? or something like Research to Dig. And there's
The
the
last
boss's
card.
orders, the final card. Krystal with immediate aggression, forcing out a game 3. We're going the distance, Pablo. We are going the distance here in round 6.
The last card being that boss's orders, and I wonder if Krystal knew her boss's orders was at the bottom, so just to shuffle with the Buddy Puffin, as you mentioned, then perhaps shuffling and then failing that and playing the Greninja to draw 2 cards and then the Pokégear, then you look at the top 9, but it worked out. It was the 7th card, and Krystal takes us to a game 3.
And not a lot of time remaining in this too, but with how this matchup has been playing, these have been quick games for Control. Both players have been playing cards, setting up. I want to see this game finish. We had a little bit of an extension, I believe, because of the way the sleeve situation happened, as you could see on stream, but wow. Isaiah not having as powerful as a start in game 1, even with NTV in the deck, and even with turn 2 Pidgeot EX put into play, it just wasn't enough. Krystal was able to take the knockout on that Sandshrew with the Star Chronos and then Metal Blast through the Entei, removing Isaiah of all threats off the board and taking 3 prize cards in essentially what was 1 turn.
Yeah, and Krystal's deck really running on all cylinders with those multiple Metangs, multiple Dialga in play, which is what she wasn't able to do based on the aggression from Isaiah on game 1. So as long as Isaiah doesn't start that anti-aggression, I do still have to give the advantage to Krystal.
Here we go, game 3, clock winding down. Let's see if we reach a proper conclusion as Isaiah will kick the action off. Does start Pidgey, a great Pokemon to have in the active spot. Of course, Pidgeot EX, along with all of its great things that it has going for it. High HP, does search out the card every turn. It has a free retreat on top of that. So if Isaiah can pivot into Entei with an energy card this turn and something to follow up the following turn, this is exactly what kind of Pokemon you want to start, since it lets you just get out of the active spot the following turn.
Yeah, certainly. Now, the anti-aggression so crucial for Isaiah to be able to close this out. We do see the attachment as well, which with only 6 energies even, having an energy on your starting hand is so unlikely, but Isaiah finding it anyways.
Action on Krystal does start with an Ultra Ball, and immediately we'll just have to figure out how this board is going to be set up. Starting that Beldum means you can maybe use that Magnet Lift attack if you want to guarantee you have a solid second turn, or you can commit 1 more energy to your Dialga, but there's pros and cons. Really, just talk me through what are the benefits of going for Metal Lift to end your turn or Magnet Lift to end the turn based off of, or instead going into a Dialga V and attaching the energy there instead?
I mean, with the energy on the Dialga, now you're that much closer to Star Chronos, right? With the energy for the Magnetic Lift, you guarantee that you're going to have a very good follow-up turn. So I think the decision comes down to what else is in Krystal's hand at this point in time. Does she already have a follow-up supporter? I guess she just wants to guarantee the Magnetic Lift no matter what.
Pokégear, whiffing, not finding any supporter cards, but it's okay. Krystal does have an Iono in the hand, and that can disrupt a little bit of what Isaiah was building up. We're just going to see the Super Odd be played now, valuing putting that Origin Form Dialga V-Star into the deck, because it is something that Krystal wants to draw into on the following turn.
Now, if Krystal doesn't find a Buddy Puffin and Isaiah is able to go Rare Candy Pidgeot, and she's left with no Beldum in play, she's going to be in a very rough spot against that Entei.
So let's see it here. Big 6 cards. We're having a sleeve fiasco all the way through. We'll see. Hopefully we'll make sure our action is resumed. Our players are playing with properly protected decks. And that's a very valid question there for Isaiah, making sure that there is an extension. Time really matters between these players. We've seen a few times. I mean, it matters, and we've seen how much important even a couple seconds can matter. We talked about 10 damage. 10 seconds can matter too, Pablo. And with how many little breaks we've had, hopefully we'll make sure these players are playing with the proper amount of time and figuring everything out. But these are, as you said, a big 6 cards. Do we see something like Buddy Puffin? More Beldum put into play, and the final card is that Buddy Puffin, and that is huge, especially with how solid the rest of the hand is.
Yeah.
Matang for next turn, Dialga V-Star, supporter cards, and can stack the deck with whatever card she chooses to, thanks to that Magnet Lift attack.
Yeah, fantastic Iono here for Krystal. Pretty much ideal setup. Now, Isaiah can take advantage of this by going Rare Candy Pidgeot attach boss. That's a big ask.
And and a big top deck.
And
Candy Pidgeot, 4 Seal Stone. And with this 4 Seal Stone, if this could guarantee a knockout on Dialga. This is an insane turn 2 for Isaiah. What just happened?
I mean, did Isaiah magnetic lift the previous turn?
I didn't watch him do that. You don't get to use your opponent's attacks. And look at that, the Force Seal Stone just going immediately onto the Entei. Wants to make sure this Rotom can receive a tool card later on that maybe gives it a little bit more HP. Heads up thinking here for Isaiah. Finds the Mist Energy, and Krystal can smell something is probably not right with how fast Isaiah is playing. There is another Pokemon into play, and the boss's orders can take a knockout onto the lone Dialga V. If there was one more, Krystal would have such a better chance here, but just those 3 combination of cards swings everything into Isaiah's favor as the time winds down.
Yeah, and Krystal top decking that Metang, but there's no Dialga to power up at this point, so I think Krystal really needs to establish both of those this upcoming turn to even stand a chance. And there's almost 7 minutes on the clock, Ethan. Do you think that's going to be enough for Isaiah to close this out, maybe?
We're actually just going to see a boss's orders. Interesting. So not digging through the deck at all. Just wanted to maybe stack the deck for next turn, try and stall the active spot. But Isaiah does play those Penny in the deck. And this is something that I don't think he maybe went out of his way to not do. But well, let's think back to that first game. Decided to attach the double turbo energy instead of play Penny. I think if Krystal has information that Isaiah's playing Penny in his deck, she maybe doesn't make this play.
That is very true. Yeah, maybe that crucial decision by Isaiah all the way back in game 1 actually makes Krystal change her play, as you mentioned. And now we're going to see the Penny. There's no threat of Dialga. You can take another prize card. And now Isaiah 2 turns away or 3 turns away from winning this game.
Yeah, could just re-bench this Radiant Charizard, use this Lost Vacuum to get rid of the Force Seal Stone. And if Isaiah has something like a Hero's Cape or maybe something like a Bravery Charm, can make this Entei V even harder to knock out. Isaiah playing fast, going down to 3 prize cards left, and Krystal does find a nice card off the top. Of course, did use that Magnet Lift attack the previous turn, so Nestball can find this Origin Form Dialga V, but now you got to continue to ask yourself, if Dialga comes down, is it just going to be knocked out via another Gusting card that Isaiah could have in his deck?
Yeah, and I think Krystal might not realize that there's only access to 1 boss for Isaiah, so choosing to go for that Samazenta, the strategy that we saw not be successful in game 1, finds another Nestball. So this would have been the turn to bench both Dialgas, right?
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, she's only going to be able to bench 1, which might still be enough, but she could also choose not to because she's playing very defensively. You can see the hesitation on the Nestball.
Yeah, it's very tough to know. I mean, there's so many lines that are so hard to see when you're in the middle of the game. You've got the clock pressure, the pressure of being on stage, so much to think about. I mean, even the previous turn, if you used Beam on the Metang or even hit for 220 damage with the Beldum, then all of a sudden this Retaliate attack is dealing enough damage. So, but even in that case, right, we could have seen another Penny get played. So there's so many things to think about, so many lines between both of our players. Time winding down, and Krystal struggling to find a door, an entryway back into this game, staring down an insanely developed board on Isaiah's side, having no Dialga V in play, and your opponent already at 3 prize cards remaining. It's looking very, very tough for Krystal, but I've seen crazier games get pulled out. She's got to dig what she got to do what she can here to pull this out, put her head into the game.
Yeah, now did find another Nestball after she went for Greninja. So one final chance for Krystal to bench a Dialga this turn. Hopefully thinning enough, and there we see it. Finally hit the field. Is it too late? I guess we'll see. I think this is where Krystal might finally learn that Isaiah is not playing another boss. Unless, like, if Isaiah goes quick search Palpad and then find the boss somehow, then you know they only have 1 boss, right? Or if they don't boss this turn, then you only, when the option is very obvious right there, right? Then okay, you don't go for it. But all right, defensive play right there with the Prime Catcher. Gonna see another Magnetic Lift to stack the deck.
Big Metal Maker there, though. Wow, 3 energies onto this Dialga. It will, of course, be all for naught if it is knocked out. But look, every energy card counts. Okay, we've got 5 energy now in play just off those 2 Metal Maker. And with how set up, essentially, these backup Pokemon are, we're just going to see Krystal pass the turn over, not decide to attach for turn. I mean, that's something you really want to make sure you get energy down every single turn. So maybe could come into play later on, but we will see the Penny pick up this Radiant Charizard yet again, back into this Entei, and now Isaiah is just 2 prize cards away after this turn from being able to win this 3rd game.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Ethan, imagine if these two energies had been on the Bellum and you hit for 20, right? I mean, now there's a Bravery Charm that stops it, but you don't know that, right? So then maybe you start Chronos, get the knockout, and you're pretty golden. But now the Radiant Charizard is threatening this Dialga V-Star that's about to come up, even if it's Star Chronos or gets a knockout. For 3 energies, Radiant Charizard can now KO you, so it's going to be a little difficult here to make any sort of comeback. And 2 minutes on the clock, plus 3 turns, essentially 2 more turns for either player. Then I think we might see Isaiah run away with this one.
Yeah, it would have been far-fetched if Krystal still had her Prime Catcher. Then there is a world where you could Prime Catcher the Radiant Charizard, take a knockout the turn that you play an Iono to hand disrupt, and then use Boss's Orders the following turn. But with that Prime Catcher essentially being negated for free with Penny as the supporter choice to allow this Radiant Charizard to just move out of the active spot, it's going to be very tough here for Krystal, especially since this Entei V will not be knocked out by anything like Star Chronos. Can be knocked out to Metal Blast, but Pidgeot, Charizard with a double turbo, that's not a combination you want to play into.
Yeah, definitely not. And it's all because of that pesky red symbol at the bottom left corner for Dialga. Being weak to fire is what's turning the tide. And as we talked about in the beginning, right, how do control decks adapt to their bad matchup in Dialga? Well, this is how, and this is how, and preemptively powering up Radiant Charizard is how you do it.
So we are just over a minute remaining in this match now. I'm not sure if that accounts for any time extension, some small things that we've seen throughout the match. We'll keep our eyes. We'll make sure we let you guys know if it comes to that, who is our turn 0. There are some very weird interactions in turns when it comes to Star Chronos. You can steal your opponent's turn in time, so that is something I have my eye on, but it just feels like even if Krystal were to try and stall another Pokemon into the active spot, Isaiah's got still so many resources left to continue to attack every turn. Will be the Iono as the supporter for choice. We'll draw 6 cards still. Krystal yet to take a prize card in this match. Isaiah being put down to just 2 cards in hand as we are nearing just under a minute remaining in round number 6.
As we do see the Metal Maker hit 1 energy, Star Chronos is ready. 30 seconds on the clock. So if Krystal is turn 0 and uses Star Chronos, then she's also turn 1 and turn 2, correct?
No, I believe that she would just be turn 1, Isaiah would be turn 2, and then she would be turn 3. So the turns still progress as normal, since there are a certain amount of turns in time.
Oh, right.
But you would just take your opponent, instead of your turn being turn 1 and 3, so you would just be turn 1, you would just be turn 2, and that's it.
Okay.
So that's how it works. So we'll confirm. So Krystal turn 0 and uses Star Chronos. So now, if everything is correct, Krystal is turn 1 in terms of time. So Isaiah will have 1 turn remaining with how things play to win this game. We're just going to actually see the retreat here, and this is what Krystal's going to do. He's going to make it as hard as possible for Isaiah to win this game. Isaiah was put to a 2-card hand with that Iono, and also a 1-prize Pokemon has been put active. And with Isaiah being down his boss's orders, Isaiah needs to find boss plus fire energy. And I don't know if there's a combination of cards. I think would have to have Palpat off the 2 plus a fire to be able to get there. That would be a crazy combination of cards. So let's see how things play out, and we'll make sure we're confirmed to make sure everybody's on the same turns of time. But that is how I believe it works with Star Chronos.
I think you are right, Ethan. And as you mentioned, 2-card hand. What does Isaiah have here? So many cards needed. The boss's order still in the discard pile. The only copy as well.
Needs to find Palpat and fire. Do we see the combination?
There's a fire?
There's a fire energy, but I don't know if Isaiah can take the knockout of anything else.
Does have the fire, but it seems like Star Chronos, because we do have confirmation. Krystal was turn 0 and also turn 1. Isaiah is now turn 2, and therefore Krystal will be turn 3. So that Star Chronos just allowed Krystal to tie this series and essentially take away that win from Isaiah. It's crazy to think about.
That is insane. Star Chronos not being used offensively, but being used to control time itself, saying, listen, I know what you're trying to do, but hey, I'm the control master. I'm the time master. Let me take a hand for this for a second. And wow, victory looked like it was almost imminent there for Isaiah, and this Star Chronos may have just snatched away the game with Isaiah having just 1 turn left, which he should normally have had in how time rules work. There's no way he ever loses this, but because of one less turn, the game flips upside down on itself.
Yeah, Isaiah should have been turn 1 and turn 3, but because of Star Chronos, the Time Master, as you mentioned, like the control deck just got controlled, Ethan. Out-controlled.
You really got to wonder if we had more time in this game. If there was only more time, right?
Yeah.
Then things
One more
could have
minute,
been
right?
so different, and that's just the beauty of Pokemon. We'll see Charizard EX making its second appearance so far in this series, so it will be powered up, and it will be able to take a knockout onto the Zamazenta. But from there, I'm not quite sure there's anything else. And yeah, Krystal putting the dice in front,
like,
saying,
you know,
hey,
your
look,
turn 2,
you
right?
know what you're supposed to do here. You know how things work. Taking the time away, showing, saying, look, your turn 2. We're going to see the knockout. Krystal will be the third and final turn, and we're just going to see Krystal bring this Pokemon up. It looks like Stilk is going to go through the actions, draws for turn, and passes. And that's it. It's a tie. Dialga showing him he's the Time Master. He knows how to control it. Dialga V-Star stealing the turn away and forcing a tie. That was such a roller coaster of a series just when we thought Isaiah had what he needed to close the set out. Dialga snatches away the turn of time, and our players will get a tie in this round.
Very well done by Krystal. Very well analyzed, right? And that's part of playing in the tournament, right? You're not just playing your cards. You need to be aware of the time, the rules, right? And yeah, Star Chronos worked. Yeah, not in the way you would have expected it to, but Krystal was able to stabilize just enough. And this all comes down to that nest ball that she drew off of the Radiant Greninja. If she doesn't draw the nest ball, because she chose not to set up the Dialga initially, right? So she had a last opportunity to do it. She did it, and it completely paid off. After, as we saw in Game 1, that Entei took over the whole game. Game 3 was almost the same.
This is what happens when you're not able to set up Dialga, when it just gets picked off with fast aggression from Entei, and it looked like in this first game, there was nothing Krystal could do, and there was nothing she could do. It was Entei being the star of the show. We saw some cute attackers in there. Minior made some appearances, but that was all she wrote. And then in Game 2, Krystal, even with just having a single Beldum and Dialga V to start the turn off, and after some aggression from Isaiah bringing up different Pokemon into the active spot, still got lucky enough off the Metal Maker, found enough energy in play, and was able to just use Star Chronos to take that knockout, build up to a big Metal Blast, and that Lumineon V, though it was great at setting up that Pidgeot, ended up being Isaiah's final 2 prize cards he gave up to another Metal Blast attack.
Now, in Game 1, we were talking about how Krystal could have scooped up a little earlier. Seems like she scooped up at just the right time, because an extra minute, an extra 30 seconds could have changed the tide of this game completely.
And the tide was fully in Isaiah's favor in this third game. Powered up as many threats as you could think. The Entei, the Radiant Charizard, even Charizard EX could have been a threat down the line. But even with all of that, Krystal found her line. It was taking that turn away from Isaiah in turns of time, starting with turn 0, taking away turn 1, putting Isaiah at just a single turn remaining. And that was what she needed to have Isaiah just fall one piece short. Had the fire energy, but just did not have the Pal Pad plus Boss's orders to close the game out. Both these players still undefeated, but I mean, if you're Isaiah walking away from that, that's gotta sting, you being so close to being at 6-0, 1 match point away from making it into day 2. But for a player like him who is no stranger to day 2s, being those 2 match points closer to being in another top cut and finally getting that big win that he's been looking for so long.
Yeah, and not to mention that he's right outside of the top 16 of North America right now, like in 23rd, 22nd place or so. So a good tournament here puts him in a really good spot to secure that Tier 1 Worlds invite. So yeah, walking away with that tie, being so close, definitely hurts a little bit.
Time Master, that's all I gotta say, Pablo.
Time Master,
Dialga put on a show for us, and I mean, look, that's what you've got to think about sometimes with Dialga. We saw sort of the same interaction more recently with, of course, that Rapid Strike Urshifu Medicham. That's one of the memories. When I first started casting at EUIC, there was a turn where Medicham Yoga Loop stole a turn away from UV Max and then was able to force ties. So that's sort of the way that the rules work. I'm sure Isaiah, nothing more he really could have done in that third game. Played super fast, but I'm sure after that, again, just saying, is there any way I could have sped things up? Is there any way I could have sequenced that final turn, maybe when I was using Quick Search to, instead of maybe finding that double turbo energy, maybe get that Pal Pad to put the boss back in? There's lots of things to think about and really reflect on As you're walking away, you gotta keep your headspace positive though, so you don't tilt for the rest of the rounds.
Yeah, and I mean, Isaiah and both players actually have 3 win-and-ins, right, at this point in time. Any round they win from now until the end of the tournament, they will book their plays in day 2. So both players in a fantastic spot. Krystal played to her outs, did what she needed to do to make sure that she walked away with a point at that point in time. And I would say also, like, if she had a slightly stronger start, she wouldn't have been in that spot either. When we saw in Game 2 her deck functioning in all cylinders, we saw how dominant it can be, right? So definitely could have gone either way depending on starts and whatnot. And that's what makes this game what it is, right? That variance, that how things can happen when you, like, the way you expect them to and how you don't expect them to.
That's why I love Pokemon, Pablo. That's why I love Pokemon. Speaking of I love Pokemon, I love item cards as well. And of course, if you've been watching on Twitch throughout this weekend, we've been holding a community poll to showcase what the viewers think the most powerful item cards in the current standard format are. We've got a bracket of 8 of our chosen item cards to take a look at. We did see Buddy Poffin take the win over Mirage Gate. I can happily say I represented that card, so you know I did my job here, but we're going to have another battle off as we continue to go through our bracket. It looks like this time it will be Rare Candy up against Ultra Ball. We were talking about cards that have been in the game for a while. I mean, Rare Candy, and if we're talking about every single form of Rare Candy, it's been here from the beginning, Pablo.
Yeah, Rare Candy got printed all the way back in EX Sandstorm 2003. However, we had Pokemon Breeder even before that. So as you mentioned from the very beginning, this effect of skipping your stage 1 has been there. Evolution, a very key component of the Pokemon trading card game. And I'm going to be on the Rare Candy team.
That's great, because Ultra Ball is one of my favorite cards, so I got to do Ultra Ball proud. But Pablo, kick us off here.
All right.
Tell me about Rare Candy. Why is it better than Ultra Ball? I mean, Ultra Ball is a great card, but what makes Rare Candy incredible? I
mean, Rare Candy, as we just mentioned, right, the whole game revolves around evolving Pokemon. Usually the most powerful Pokemon are the evolved Pokemon, right? We have Pidgeot, we have Charizard, we have the incoming Dragapult TX. And what's better than attacking with your evolved Pokemon, getting out as soon as possible so you can start attacking with it. So being able to skip a whole turn, right, just like Star Chronos that we just saw come into play, getting a turn 2 attacking stage 2 Pokemon instead of turn 3 is so powerful. Rare Candy, and it was so powerful that it got nerfed. Yeah, the rules changed, the text changed, so Rare Candy was so good that it needed to drop in power for it to be balanced, and it's still a 4 of in so many decks today.
I'm going to argue for Ultra Ball here. You know what card hasn't been nerfed that's been around because it's just so respected? Ultra Ball. See, Rare Candy right now, if you were talking about Rare Candy back before it was nerfed, maybe I would agree that Ultra Ball is better. But Rare Candy right now is nothing in comparison to Ultra Ball. Ultra Ball is my beloved because Ultra Ball finds you everything. You want a Pokemon? Play Ultra Ball in your deck. You want to put energy in your discard pile and find a Pokemon? Put Ultra Ball in your deck. You want to find a supporter card? Put Ultra Ball in your deck. We have Luminion. Ultra Ball does everything. It's a staple card for a reason. It's because it can be included in so many decks. There are other options that find Pokemon, sure. Buddy Poffin is a great example for that. But if you're playing evolution decks, if you're playing Pokemon with big HP, Ultra Ball gets you there. He finds you the Pokemon. It gets you what you need. That's all I have to say. Ultra Ball, I am so confident that Twitch chat loves Ultra Ball as much as I am that I don't need to speak more for this. Ultra Ball is just that good. And think about this, Twitch chat. How many games would you lose to not finding Pokemon if you didn't have Ultra Ball? And how many games would you lose to not having Rare Candy in your deck? Let that sink in. Think about that.
I mean, let's talk about this, though. Like, Ultra Ball is absolutely a fantastic card. But what good is finding your Pokemon if you can't use them, right? What good is finding your Charizard if you can't use it? All decks that are really good right now, or at least the best decks, revolve around attacking as quickly as you can.
It's true.
What card